I deleted the recording myself. I sat on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I dragged my sister's last voicemail into the trash. Then I emptied the trash. Then I restarted my phone. I did it because I'd listened to it 41 times that day, and I understood that if I didn't destroy it, it would destroy me. The voicemail was 11 seconds long. Noor had left it the morning she died, a Thursday, mid-October. Nothing remarkable about the weather. 3 months after I deleted it, the file reappeared in my voicemail inbox. Same duration, same date stamp, same everything. Except it was 14 seconds long now, and she said a word at the end that I know she never said. You need to understand who Noor was before you'll understand why any of this matters. She was 3 years younger than me. She had a gap between her front teeth she refused to fix because she said it gave her character, which was her word for anything she was too stubborn to change. She used to eat cereal for dinner at least 3 nights a week, always the same kind. This off-brand honey oat thing from the corner store near our mother's apartment. And she'd eat it standing at the counter, reading something on her phone, spooning it into her mouth without looking. I'd tell her to sit down. She'd say, "I'm a grown woman, Layla. I'll stand where I want." Then she'd leave the bowl in the sink without rinsing it, and I'd rinse it for her, and neither of us would say anything about it, because that was the deal. That had always been the deal. She carried a purple marker in her bag, the way other people carry chapstick always, without thinking about it. She used it for everything. Grocery lists, phone numbers on her wrist, notes in the margins of library books she was supposed to return. Once, when I was crying in her car after a fight with our mother, she uncapped the marker and drew a small, lopsided star on the back of my hand. She didn't say anything about it, just drew it and put the cap back on and kept driving. I looked at that star for 3 days before it faded. When we were kids, maybe 9 and 12, we invented a word, Zarafa. It didn't mean anything, that was the point. Noor said we needed a word that only we knew, so that if we were ever in a crowd and needed each other, we could say it and no one else would understand. We never actually used it in a crowd. We used it at the dinner table when our parents were arguing, one of us murmuring Zarafa under our breath until the other one smiled. We used it on the phone when one of us was sad and didn't want to explain why. We used it so often it stopped being a code word and became something else. A sound that meant, "I'm your sister and that's enough." I haven't said it out loud since she died. I'm afraid of how it will sound in a room where she isn't. She called me every morning, not to say anything important. She'd call while walking to the bus stop and narrate whatever she was seeing. "There's a dog in a sweater. Layla, this dog has a better wardrobe than you." Or, "The guy at the falafel cart remembers my name now. I think I have to marry him." Or just, "It's cold. Why do I live here? Remind me why I live here." And I'd say, "Because you love complaining about the cold." And she'd laugh, this short clipped thing, almost a bark, and hang up without saying goodbye. She never said goodbye, she just stopped talking, and the line went dead, and I'd stare at the phone for a second, and then I'd go about my day. That was the voicemail, the last one. Left at 8:47 a.m. on October 17th. She said, "Layla, I think this might be the coldest day that's ever happened. I'm not being dramatic. My bones are cold. My bones, Layla. Okay, call me back." 11 seconds. I can hear it in my head right now, every breath, every syllable, the way she leaned on bones both times, the little intake of air before okay. I know it the way you know a prayer. I know it better than I know my own name. She was hit by a delivery truck at 8:52 a.m. 5 minutes later. 5 minutes between the voicemail and the intersection and the driver who said he didn't see her because the sun was in his eyes. I didn't delete the voicemail for 3 months. I listened to it every day, sometimes 5 times, sometimes 30. I'd listen to it in the grocery store, standing in the cereal aisle, staring at the off-brand honey oat, pressing the phone against my ear so hard it left a mark. I'd listen to it at night when I couldn't sleep. I'd listen to it in the morning when I woke up, and for 1/2 second forgot she was dead, and then remembered again that daily re-breaking, that little fracture that never healed, because it happened again every single morning. I deleted it because my therapist said I was using the recording as a substitute for grieving. She said I was keeping Noor alive in a way that wasn't letting me move forward. She said it gently. She said it like she understood. And I hated her for it. But I also knew she was right, because I'd started doing something I couldn't explain. I'd started listening to the voicemail and responding to it, out loud, as if the conversation was still happening, as if Noor was still on the other end, walking to the bus stop, her breath white in the cold. So I deleted it, and for a while that was the right thing. The silence was terrible, but it was honest. I stopped reaching for my phone in the mornings. I stopped standing in the cereal aisle. I started sleeping through the night most nights. I started to forget the exact cadence of her voice, not the words, never the words, but the specific way she breathed between them. That forgetting felt like a second death. But my therapist said that was normal. She said grief was like that. She said the forgetting was part of it. I found her purple marker in December. It was in my coat pocket, the other coat, the one she hadn't borrowed. She must have left it there the last time she went through my closet looking for something to take. The cap was chewed. She always chewed the caps. I put it on my nightstand, and I haven't moved it since. Then the voicemail came back. January 14th, 11:09 p.m. I was in bed, half asleep, phone on the nightstand. It buzzed. Not a call. A notification. The voicemail app, which I hadn't opened in weeks, showing one new message. I almost didn't look. I almost rolled over and went back to sleep. But some reflex left over from the months of compulsive listening made me pick up the phone. Voicemail from Noor. October 17th, 8:47 a.m. The same timestamp, the same name, the same little icon. Her contact photo, a selfie she'd taken in my bathroom mirror, tongue out, hair wet. I pressed play. Her voice. Layla, I think this might be the coldest day that's ever happened. I'm not being dramatic. My bones are cold. My bones, Layla. Okay, call me back. Everything was right. Every breath, every syllable. The way she leaned on bones. The intake of air before okay. But the recording didn't stop. There were 3 more seconds. A pause. And then, very quietly, almost a whisper. Layla. Just my name. One more time. In a tone she hadn't used, softer, lower, like she was standing right behind me instead of walking down a street. Like she was in the room. And then the line went dead. I sat up in bed. My hands were shaking. I played it again, and again, and again. The word was there, every time. I called my mother the next morning. Not about the voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk about the voicemail. I called because it was a Saturday, and I always called my mother on Saturdays, and because I needed to hear a living voice. I needed someone to be ordinary at me. She was. She talked about the woman in her building who kept leaving shoes in the hallway. She talked about a recipe she'd seen online for something with eggplant. She asked if I was eating, and I said yes, and she said, eating what? And I said, food, and she said, Layla, in exactly the way Noor used to say my name, that same exasperation, that same love buried under annoyance, and I had to press my hand over my mouth so she wouldn't hear me cry. After we hung up, I went back to the voicemail. I looked at the metadata duration, timestamp, file size, the things that are supposed to be facts. The original voicemail had been 11 seconds. I remembered this specifically because I'd mentioned it to my therapist. 11 seconds, that's all I have. 11 seconds of her being alive. The voicemail on my phone said 14 seconds, but the timestamp still said October 17th, 8:47 a.m. And the file size was wrong, too small, as if the extra 3 seconds had been folded into almost nothing. I told myself it was a glitch. I told myself this calmly, rationally, the way my therapist would have wanted me to. Then I plugged in my earbuds and listened to those last 3 seconds on a loop for an hour. It was Noor's voice. I was certain. Not a distortion, not an echo, not some artifact of compression. It was her mouth, her breath, her specific way of holding a vowel. She said my name the way she said it when she was about to tell me something serious. The way she'd said it the night she told me she was dropping out of school. Or the night she told me about the lump in her breast that turned out to be nothing. Layla. Like she was trying to get my attention. Like there was something else she needed to say, and she'd run out of time. Noor and I shared an apartment for 2 years after our father left. I was 22. She was 19. We couldn't afford the place, but we stayed because our mother had lived there before the divorce, and the walls still smelled like her cooking cumin and coriander and the specific char of bread left too long on the stove. Noor slept in the smaller bedroom. She'd hung a tapestry over the window because she said curtains were for people who'd given up. And every morning the sun came through the thin fabric and turned the whole room amber. She kept a glass of water on the nightstand that she never drank. She kept a library book she never returned. She kept a list on the wall of every dog she'd petted that month, written in purple marker with ratings. October 3rd, golden retriever outside the laundromat, 10 out of 10, would die for. October 7th, small angry thing near the park, 4 out of 10, but I respect the energy. October 12th, lab mix on the bus, 11 out of 10, life-changing. The list was still on the wall when she died. I couldn't bring myself to paint over it. I moved out of the apartment 6 weeks later, and the landlord painted over it, and I grieved that list like it was a limb. She used to braid my hair. I know that sounds small, but Noor had this way of doing it. She'd stand behind me on the couch, her knees on either side of my shoulders, and she wouldn't use a brush. She'd just work through the tangles with her fingers, slowly, patiently, which was remarkable because Noor was not a patient person about anything else. She talked the whole time about nothing, about everything, about the guy at the falafel cart, about whether dogs dream, and I'd close my eyes and listen, and it was the safest I ever felt. Not safe from anything, just safe. The kind of safe that doesn't have an opposite because you don't know it exists until it's gone. The last time she braided my hair was 2 weeks before she died. She was sitting on my couch, and she reached over without asking, the way she always did, and gathered my hair and started. And I almost said, I need to finish this email, but I didn't. I let her. And I will think about that decision, that tiny, accidental mercy I gave myself for the rest of my life. I'm telling you this because you need to understand. Noor was not a mystery. She was not an anomaly. She was a person who rated dogs in purple marker and braided my hair without asking, and left cereal bowls in the sink and called me every morning to tell me about the weather. She was specific and ordinary and irreplaceable in the way that only a person can be. Not because she was extraordinary, but because she was her, and there is no version of the world that can generate another one. When she died, the world didn't become haunted. It became empty. The voicemail didn't change that. The voicemail made it worse. By the end of January, the recording was growing. That's the only word for it. Not changing, growing. Like something being built in the dark. I checked it every day. I know that's the opposite of what my therapist wanted. I didn't tell my therapist. I'd stopped going. The voicemail was 16 seconds now. The new seconds accrued slowly, unevenly. 14.3 morning, 14.8 2 days later, then nothing for a week, then a jump to 16. The new audio was not words, not yet. It was sounds, a breath, something that might have been wind or fabric moving. And underneath all of it, something that sounded like traffic, but not the traffic from the original recording. This was slower, thicker, like it was coming from a great distance. I ran the file through Audacity, teaching myself at 3 a.m. from YouTube tutorials how to isolate frequencies and amplify quiet sections. When I amplified the last 5 seconds, I heard breathing. Steady, even, calm. Not Noor's quick, cold weather breath from the first 11 seconds. This was slow, close to the microphone. as if someone was holding the phone against their mouth and just being there. I closed my laptop. I went to the kitchen. I opened the cabinet where Noor used to keep the cereal and stood there staring at the empty shelf. On the counter, her purple marker sat where I'd left it after finding it in my coat. The cap was still chewed. The ink probably still worked. I picked it up and held it and put it back down and didn't know why I'd reached for it in the first place. That night I dreamed about Noor braiding my hair. In the dream, she was humming something, not a song, just a sound, the way she hummed when she was concentrating. When I woke up, I could still feel the weight of her hands. My friend Samir came over for dinner in February. He'd known Noor too. They'd worked together at the copy shop near campus for a summer, and he'd once described her as the only person who made me want to be funnier. He brought wine, and I made pasta, and we sat on the floor, because I still hadn't bought a table for the new apartment, and he told me about his job, and his terrible landlord, and a date he'd gone on that ended with the other person crying in a parking garage, and I laughed for the first time in weeks. At some point, he got quiet, and then he said, "She gave me advice once, at the copy shop. I was complaining about my life. I don't even remember what about, and she looked up from the machine and said, 'You're not stuck, Samir. You're just standing still. Those are different things.'" He was staring at his glass. I think about that all the time. I think about it more now than when she was alive, which is, he didn't finish. We sat with that for a while. Then I told him about the voicemail. I don't know why. I'd planned not to, but the wine was warm in my chest, and Samir had been Noor's friend too, not just someone who knew her, but someone who missed her, someone who carried his own version of her absence, and I needed someone else to hear it. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I played it for him, all 16 seconds. He listened. His face didn't change. When it was over, he said, "Play it again." I played it again. "Layla," he said, "that's not what she says." "What do you mean?" "At the end, she doesn't say Layla." I stared at him. "She says, 'I'm here.'" I played it again. I pressed the phone against my ear, the way I used to, hard enough to leave a mark. "Layla, I think this might be the coldest day that's ever happened. I'm not being dramatic. My bones are cold. My bones, Layla." "Okay, call me back." Pause. "Layla." I heard Layla. I heard it clearly. My name, in my sister's voice. But Samir was looking at me with an expression I didn't recognize, and he said, very quietly, "She says, 'I'm here, Layla.' She says it twice." He wasn't drunk. He wasn't joking. He was scared. I played it again. I heard Layla. He heard, "I'm here." We played it 7 more times, sitting on the floor with the phone between us, and every single time we heard different words. After Samir left, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with the lights on, phone on my chest, and I thought about the last time I saw Noor alive. It was a Wednesday, the day before. She came over to borrow a jacket, my green one, the one with the broken zipper that she liked because it was ugly in a cool way. She stood in the doorway and said, "I'll bring it back tomorrow." And I said, "You always say that." And she said, "Tomorrow, I promise." And I said, "Sure." And she left, and I went back to whatever I was watching on my laptop. And that was it. That was the last conversation. No weight, no meaning, no foreshadowing, just a jacket and a broken zipper and a promise about tomorrow. She was wearing the jacket when she died. The hospital gave it back to me in a plastic bag. I haven't opened the bag. I thought about calling my mother. I thought about telling her the voicemail was back. But my mother had her own grief, vast, tidal, the kind that rearranged her. And I didn't want to add to it. My mother kept Noor's phone number in her contacts. She'd told me that once, almost casually. "I can't delete it, Layla. What if she calls?" And I'd said nothing, because what could I say? She wasn't being irrational. She was being a mother. So I didn't call. Instead, I opened the voicemail app and looked at the metadata again. The timestamp had changed. Not to a new date, not to January. Still October 17th, still 8:47 a.m. But the year was different. The voicemail was now stamped 2019. Noor died in 2024. In 2019, Noor was 20 years old. She was alive. She was working at the copy shop. She hadn't moved to the new apartment yet. She still had the dog rating list on her wall, though it was a different wall. The wall in our mother's apartment, the room we'd shared as children, twin beds pushed together until we were 12, and Noor insisted on separation because I breathed too loud. In 2019, I hadn't started therapy. Noor hadn't started calling me every morning. That started later, after she moved out, after she realized she was lonely in a way she hadn't expected. In 2019, we were still figuring out how to be adults in each other's lives, still negotiating the distance between the closeness of childhood and the strange formality of grown siblings who loved each other but didn't always know how to say it. The voicemail could not have been from 2019, but the timestamp said it was. I lay there in the dark and thought, what if the voicemail isn't something she left? What if it's something she's leaving, right now, from wherever she is, and it's reaching me the only way it can, through the shape of something that already existed, something I already knew how to hold. I don't know where that thought came from. I wish I could take it back. I took my phone to a repair shop, not because I thought the phone was broken, but because I needed someone to tell me something rational. The technician plugged my phone into his computer. He opened the voicemail file. He frowned. "This is weird," he said. "The creation date says 2019, but the codec wasn't available until 2022, and the duration says 18 seconds. 18? It had been 16 the night before. And there's no carrier metadata, no routing information. It's like this file was never transmitted, like it just appeared." He looked at me the way people look at you when they want to help but can't, and he said, "This file shouldn't exist." I took the phone back. On the bus ride home, I held it in my lap and looked at the screen Noor's contact photo, the selfie in my bathroom mirror, tongue out, hair wet, and I thought about the time she convinced me to skip work and spend the entire afternoon in the park. We lay on our backs in the grass, and she pointed at the clouds and made up names for them. "That one's Gerald. That one's a divorce." I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe, and she rolled onto her side and looked at me with this expression: delighted, conspiratorial, the exact face she made when she'd succeeded at making my life slightly more chaotic. And she said, "See? You needed this. You always need this, and you never know it." And she was right. She was always right about the things I needed. Noor used to say that the worst thing about being the younger sibling was that I had memories of her she didn't have of herself. She meant baby photos, embarrassing stories, the time she cried at a parade because the marching band was too loud. But she also meant something deeper, that I held a version of her she couldn't access, a Noor from before she was old enough to remember being Noor. She said it bothered her. She said, "You know a me that I've never met." The night she said that, we were sitting on the fire escape of the old apartment, sharing a blanket because neither of us had thought to bring two. She had the purple marker, and she was drawing on the railing spirals, stars, the word Zarafa, in small, careful letters. I watched her write it, and I felt something I couldn't name. Not love exactly. Love was too general. This was more specific. This was the feeling of being known so completely by another person that you could sit in silence on a fire escape and both understand that the silence meant something, and neither of you would ever have to explain what. I've been thinking about that, because the voicemail is 22 seconds now, and I don't recognize the last 4. The breathing is still there, steady, slow, close. But now there are words again. Not Layla, not "I'm here." Something else. Something I can't quite make out, no matter how many times I play it, no matter how much I amplify it. It's Noor's voice, I'm sure of that. but the words are just below the threshold of comprehension, like she's speaking from the bottom of a well, or through a wall, or from a place where sound works differently. For one terrible moment, I thought I heard Zarafa. I played it for my mother. I hadn't planned to, but I was at her apartment for Sunday dinner, and she was standing at the stove, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, and the phone was in my hand, and I just played it. My mother stopped stirring. She didn't move for a long time. The spoon rested against the edge of the pot. The steam curled around her hand. "Play it again," she said. I played it again. "That's not the morning she died," my mother said. "What do you mean?" "That's not what she sounds like on a cold morning. She sounds like that in summer, when she's warm, when she's been sitting in the sun." My mother's voice was very steady. "I know my daughter's voice in every season, Layla. That is July. That is her in July." I opened my mouth to argue, to explain that the voicemail was from October, that the original recording had city traffic and cold weather breathing and the sound of wind, but I stopped. Because I went back and listened to the first 11 seconds again. Really listened, with my mother's words in my head. And the traffic was gone. The wind was gone. I could hear birds. I could hear the particular ambient hush of a warm afternoon. I could hear Noor breathing slowly, comfortably, the way she breathed when she was lying in the grass in the park near our mother's apartment, shoes off, face turned up to the sun, telling me something unimportant and lovely. The recording had changed. Not the new seconds, the original. The 11 seconds I had memorized. The 11 seconds I knew better than my own heartbeat. They were different now. They had always been different. And I could no longer remember, with certainty, whether they had ever been what I thought they were. I have a photograph of Noor and me from the summer of 2023. We're at the beach, not swimming, because Noor didn't swim. She just liked sitting near the water and complaining about the sand. In the photo, she's wearing my green jacket, the one with the broken zipper. She's squinting at the camera. I'm next to her, slightly blurred, because I moved at the last second. I've had this photograph on my fridge since she died. Last week, I looked at it, and the jacket was blue. Not green. Blue. A bright, clear blue I don't own and have never owned. Noor is still squinting. I'm still blurred. The beach is the same. Everything is the same except the jacket, which is a color that doesn't exist in my life. I called Samir. I said, "What color was my jacket? The one Noor always borrowed?" He said, "Which one?" "The one with the broken zipper." He was quiet for a moment. "Blue," he said, "the blue one." "It was green." "Layla, it was blue. I remember because Noor said it matched her." "What was it, her aura?" He laughed. "She was always saying stuff like that." "I don't remember Noor saying that. I don't remember a blue jacket. But Samir does, and the photograph does, and I'm standing in my kitchen looking at a picture of my dead sister wearing a jacket in a color I can't account for, and I understand suddenly and completely that the recording is not the thing that's changing. I am, or the world is, or the past is. Something is shifting, slowly, irreversibly, and the voicemail is just the seam where the shift is visible. The one place where the alteration left a mark. The voicemail is 29 seconds now. I don't analyze it anymore. I don't run it through Audacity. I don't check the metadata or the file size or the timestamp, which has changed 3 more times, once to 2021, once to a date in March, once to a date that hasn't happened yet. I just listen. The first 11 seconds are unrecognizable. Whatever cold October morning they once contained has been overwritten by something else, a warmth, a stillness, a version of Noor I can barely identify. Her voice is the same. The words are almost the same. But the feeling is different. She's not walking to a bus stop. She's not cold. She's somewhere else, somewhere I can't picture, saying things that are almost what I remember, but not quite. Layla, I think this might be the warmest day that's ever happened. That's not what she said, but it's what she says now. And the last 18 seconds, the seconds that shouldn't exist, the seconds that accumulated like sediment, like something being built, those seconds are finally clear. I can hear every word. She's talking to me, not leaving a voicemail, talking to me, present tense, as if I'm there, wherever she is, and she can see me, and she's saying the things she'd say if she could. She talks about the cereal. She talks about the dog near the laundromat. She says she's sorry she didn't bring the jacket back. She says she meant to. She talks about the fire escape. Remember the fire escape, Layla? And I can hear her smiling. She says tomorrow again, the way she said it in the doorway, and I can hear that she knows there is no tomorrow, and she says it anyway, because that was always the deal between us. The small, stupid promises we made and broke and made again. The rhythm of being sisters. The ordinary machinery of love. And at the very end, the last second, the 29th, she says something I've never heard her say. Goodbye, Layla. Noor never said goodbye. Not once. Not on the phone, not in person, not ever. She just stopped talking and the line went dead, and you'd stare at your phone for a second and then go about your day. That was her. That was the thing about her. She never said goodbye because she always assumed there would be more calls, more mornings, more chances to say the thing she hadn't said yet. She's saying it now. I haven't played the voicemail in 4 days. Not because I'm afraid of it. Not because it's impossible or unexplainable or because the file shouldn't exist. Because the voicemail is 31 seconds now, and somewhere in those 31 seconds, Noor says goodbye to me, and every time I hear it, I have to lose her again. Every time I press play, I am standing in the hospital. I am answering the phone. I am hearing the words. I am sitting on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m. And I am also in the doorway, watching her leave in my jacket, saying, tomorrow, I promise. And I am also on the fire escape, watching her write Zarafa on the railing in purple ink. And I am also on the couch, feeling her fingers in my hair. And I am also in the park, lying in the grass, laughing so hard I can't breathe while she names the clouds. And I am also 12 years old, pushing my twin bed away from hers because she told me to. And she's laughing, and the gap in her teeth is the most familiar thing in the world. The recording shouldn't exist, but neither should the ache of reaching for your phone in the morning and knowing no one is going to call. My mother asked me to send her the voicemail. I did. She listened to it and called me back, and she was crying, and she said, "She sounds happy, Layla. Wherever that is, she sounds happy." I said, "What does she say at the end?" My mother was quiet. "She doesn't say goodbye," my mother said. "She says, 'I'll call you tomorrow.'" I don't know what the voicemail is. I don't know why it came back, or why it keeps changing, or why everyone who hears it hears something different. I don't know why the photograph changed, or why Samir remembers blue, or why the timestamp says a date that hasn't happened. I don't need to know. I need you to understand that my sister ate cereal standing up, that she rated dogs in purple marker and drew stars on my hand when I was crying, that she braided my hair without asking, that she carried a purple marker everywhere and chewed the cap and wrote our secret word on a fire escape railing one night when we were sharing a blanket, that she wore my jacket with the broken zipper because she thought it was ugly in a cool way, that she called me every morning to complain about the cold, that she never said goodbye. That last part might not be true anymore, but the rest of it is. The rest of it has to be. The voicemail is 31 seconds. Tomorrow, it might be longer. Tomorrow, there might be new words, new sounds, new versions of a morning that keeps rewriting itself. I'm not going to play it tomorrow. I'm going to call my mother instead. I'm going to ask her about the eggplant recipe. I'm going to listen to her complain about the shoes in the hallway. I'm going to sit in the silence after we hang up, and I'm going to miss my sister the way you miss a season completely, bodily, with your whole chest of and I'm going to pick up the purple marker on my nightstand and hold it and not write anything with it and put it back down. This morning, I tried to remember whether Noor hated cinnamon or loved it. I stood in the kitchen for 5 minutes trying to remember. She put it on everything, or she picked it out of everything. I can't remember which. I used to know. I knew everything about her. I knew which side she slept on and which shoe she tied first and what sound she made when she was pretending to be annoyed but was actually happy. I can't remember about the cinnamon. I think I will not be able to remember other things soon. And then I'm going to rinse the bowl she left in the sink. There is no bowl in the sink. There hasn't been for months. I rinse it anyway.